Some of the best horror sequels are never made due to shrinking interest in the franchise or complications during production, and some ideas are just joked about at the pub, like From Dusk Till Dawn. In what would have been an alternate universe where we would see a sequel start like Shaun of the Dead, only instead of there being a zombie outbreak, they're battling vampires. These lost sequels sometimes come with some consequences. Lost character arcs and unanswered questions are just some of the dissatisfaction that fans have to deal with. In worst case scenarios, fans get a sloppy, pieced together sequel that is just a shell of what was originally planned. Like we saw with Saw 3D. Saw 8 was forced into Part 7 so that any open questions to the previous films would get closure. Today we're going to dive into 5 horror movie sequels that were not made that you may never have, or probably, heard of. The Collected. Originally titled The Midnight Man and pitched as a spin-off prequel to the Saw franchise focusing on the origin story for the villain John Kramer, producers turned it down. So, writers Patrick Melton and Marcus Dunstan reworked the script into The Collector, the first film in a planned trilogy. The first 2 films center around Arkin after he breaks into a home and finds himself entangled in a series of lethal traps that have been rigged throughout the home. He manages to survive the traps only to be captured by the end of the film. In the sequel, he escapes and returns with reinforcements. And in our thrilling climax of the film, Arkin gets the upper hand on the Collector and traps him inside of a trunk. The same one that the Collector captured him in the previous film. The first film, released in 2009, grossing $10.2 million against a $3 million budget. 3 years later, The Collection was released, grossing $9.9 million and just falling short of its budget. The final film in the trilogy, The Collected, would begin filming in 2019, but production would be shut down 8 days in due to COVID. As the world began to return to semi-normal, it only got bleaker for this final chapter in the story. Marcus Dunstan revealed in an interview,
"Well, we shot for 8 days and then it was shut down. And I invested in this thing. I'd like to know what's happening. We stopped hearing from anybody with production. I know all my most of the props I brought there have been stolen. And I would think, like, anybody else who invested in this movie that thinks it's happening, wouldn't they like to know what's happening? Because I would."
Not much is known about what The Collective would be about, but there may be a small glimmer of hope that we'll see this made. Dunstan revealed late last year that the talks have begun again, but that it would only be done this time if he can make the best one of the series. World War Z 2. Based on the hit novel of the same name, World War Z released in 2013, directed by Mark Forster and starring Brad Pitt. Now, while the film shares the basic premise of a global zombie pandemic, it deviated significantly from the structure and narrative of the novel by Max Brooks, where the book was about an apocalyptic collection of individual accounts told to and recorded by a United Nations post-war committee agent following the zombie plague. Despite doubling its budget, the sequel has floundered in production hell due to scheduling conflicts with Pitt and finding the right director that would help remedy the major complaints around the deviations from the novel. David Fincher of Fight Club and Seven fame, was eventually attached to direct, and while his ideas would help steer the franchise back to the source material, his sequel would have looked a little like The Last of Us, with a focus on the film's characters. The rumored plot of the film would have revealed that the vaccine only works for 36 hours, and the zombie hordes continue to grow. Political tensions between nations continue to fester, and while Jerry and his family are still living among survivors in Canada, hope for the world soon comes when virologist named Dr. Morell develops an airborne virus that will, in theory, make the zombies fight each other. Before the Mask, the return of Leslie Vernon. Behind the Mask, the rise of Leslie Vernon is probably one of the best horror slasher films of this century that many of you have not watched. In 2006, this meta-horror comedy followed a group of film students who set out to film a documentary on a slasher, Leslie Vernon, as he prepares to strike. The sequel would take a page from the Scream franchise, where we are introduced to our characters from the first film as they are all being interviewed about the release of the Harvest Murders, a feature film dramatization of the murders Leslie committed during the events of the previous film's finale. During the film's production, a spate of suspicious accidental deaths begin to occur around the film. A producer arrives on the set to stave off any potential lawsuits or compensatory damages that might be levied against the film's production. Doc Halloran also arrives and reveals that Leslie, or someone dressed like him, has been lurking around the production as these mysterious deaths have been occurring. Together, they plan to bait the copycat killer into coming out of hiding by enlisting the help of Taylor and Doug, who have been filling their time by busting other would-be slashers before they can do any major damage. The film culminates in the third act, revealing who the killer is in a shocking twist that ends in a cliffhanger. And while it may seem like the film would focus less on Leslie Mancuso this time around, fear not. Actor Nathan Basil would have returned to reprise his role. Now infamous, Leslie fields questions regarding his stance on medical marijuana and homosexuality as they relate to his profession as a traditional slasher. And he can't help to pick apart the Harvest Murders' failings in adhering to the realism of the slasher genre.
Hello, Vernonites. It's yours truly. If you know who I am, if you don't, we're gonna remedy that situation right about now. There's some new blood, definitely, that's been infused into the game. Some reinvention going on. It's really, really exciting. And I think we really forced them to take a look at the building blocks, you know, the fundamentals again. Put the fun back in the fundamentals. And what did I get out of it? I'm not gonna lie to you. Was I a little miffed, a little disappointed, depressed, even that I didn't shoot out of the gate like I'd hoped? Maybe a little. There's nothing to do but just get back to work.
And in this film, we would also explore his relationship with Taylor further.
Come and get it, you undead sack of shit.
Bubba Nosferatu, Curse of the She-Vampires. 2002's Bubba Hotep with an elderly Elvis Presley fighting an evil mummy for all the spirits stolen by the undead villain from the retirement home may sound ridiculous, but it is fun. Elvis defeats the mummy, but not before being mortally wounded and passing away. However, if you watch through the end credits before MCU trained us that a message would appear on screen, you would have saw Elvis Returns and Bubba Nosferatu, Curse of the She-Vampires. The sequel would pick up with Elvis being revived by his nurse and then being sent to a new rest home in New Orleans. Elvis, on the other hand, is reluctant to return to the city due to some bizarre circumstances surrounding the making of a film that he shot there in the early 70s. We then flash back to that time period where we see a younger Elvis whipping supernatural ass alongside his Memphis Mafia. It would eventually be revealed that Colonel Parker, played by Paul Giamatti, would have been our big bad of the film, as he would have orchestrated Elvis's film shoot in New Orleans as a way to lure him to the city so that Parker could pay off a debt with a group of vampires. The film's climax would end in the present day at the new rest home where Elvis would encounter the vampires again and have to fight them off with his new neighbor, the elderly Native American who believes himself to be Chief Sitting Bull. Alien: Awakening. Before being shelved in favor of Ridley Scott's return to the franchise with Alien Covenant, Neil Blomkamp, the writer and director of District 9, was working on an Alien sequel. Alien 5 would have retconned the previous two Alien films in the franchise and restored order to the undoing of one of the most controversial story decisions that played out in Alien 3, where Newt and Corporal Hicks were killed off at the beginning and practically off-screen in an escape shuttle crash. Returning in Alien 5 along with Newt, Hicks, and Ripley was also a badly damaged Bishop. In this sequel, we see an older Ripley alongside an older and still alive Hicks become embroiled in a Weyland-Yutani Corporation conspiracy that forces our heroes to confront the Xenomorphs once again, accompanied by Newt, who is now in her 20s. Alien 5 would serve as a reboot in the franchise, providing us with a proper send-off for both the Ripley character and Sigourney Weaver, while passing the torch to Newt as the new lead heroine of the franchise. Since its demise, concept art has been released revealing what the film potentially would have looked like, including Ripley wearing a badass xenomorph-like body armor and a new version of the facehugger. So what horror movie sequels that you know of that have been canceled? And if you want to backtrack, we have canceled sequels for Scream, Halloween, Friday the 13th, and Sleepaway Camp. Be sure to check out those videos if you enjoyed this one. Now, don't forget to drop a like and a comment and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Appreciate you stopping by for another Pop 5, and until the next, see ya.